friends. Takes a village. Welcome, everybody. Hey, I'm Hunter. I'm one of the hosts and moderators with Power to Fly, and I am so glad you're here for our chat and learn today. We have an amazing speaker today. Rachel and I have done a few talks together now, so we're so psyched to have her back. And before we jump in, a little bit of housekeeping. So you can participate, so feel free to turn your cameras on, and you will show up on this as this is being recorded, and we'll send the link out to you after the chat so you can rewatch it or share it if you like. And if you would like to ask a question as anything comes up, or if you have any thoughts, feel free to use the public chat on the side where you can write your question that everyone can see, and Rachel and I will pull it. And if you would like to ask something anonymously, you can feel free to do that by selecting my name in the chat, Hunter, and I will be happy to ask that question for you on your behalf. Or if there's any concerns that come up, feel free to direct message me as well, and we can address that right away. And you can follow us on all the things at Power to Fly, and feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can watch talks like this or previous summits, lots of goodies, so much good stuff. Okay, so we have Rachel here today, who's an early professional experience, whose early professional experience was at Goldman Sachs in operations, at Bridgewater Associates in HR. From there, she was trained as a coach at NYU and became a certified coach through the International Coach Federation. She worked in HR research at Aon Hewitt and attained her technology MBA at NYU Stern. Through her career, she has helped, sorry, let me just move my things here so I can read what I want to say. There we go. Through her career, she, sorry, folks, there we go. Through her career, take 3, action. She has helped hundreds of professionals with career exploration for the past 4.5 years, and it'll be 5 years in November. She has been building her company, Woken, which is an online career exploration platform to coach professionals through the process of clarifying their ideal job and career path. And you get to experience some of this wisdom today. So hopefully this is going to help. So some of the main takeaways from today: how your career mindset can affect your sense of accountability, strategies to maintain your productivity level and organize your time. Oh boy, Rachel, help me with this. Debunking the typical common limiting beliefs regarding career growth. So these are the topics, some of the topics, the main topics that we're going to focus on today. So if you have any questions, I encourage you to direct them towards this, as we are focusing on that for the next hour. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Rachel with a round of applause. Welcome, Rachel.
Awesome. Hello. I am going to also share my screen, so let me know if you can see it.
Looks good.
Okay. And I have the chat open as well, so you guys can feel free to write in there, and I will pay attention accordingly. So I'm excited to dive in today. You guys heard about my background. So yeah, we are going to talk about your mindset, your accountability, and your practical strategy. So these are really the 3 keys to really master and almost achieve any goal. So we're going to dive in directly to the way that these 3 things work together. I like to envision it like this triangle here, because the mindset is so much of the foundation. When the mindset isn't feeling ready or open or confident or whatever feelings need to be there, it kind of sets the rest up in a way that you may feel like you're stalling, or maybe you're holding yourself back or getting in your own way. So that foundation is there, and really I should be almost, these are almost grayed out until the mindset is sort of ready and stable. So the bottom line of showing these 3 keys like this is so that it's okay and important to work on your mindset first, right? And recognizing that it is the first layer, very, very, very purposefully. If you're not putting in the time, it may have to do with something deeper in the mindset. So many things affect your mindset. That's the other crazy part of this, is we need to kind of tap in and tune in and recognize and sort of speak to ourselves and listen to ourselves to see how we're feeling. And that has to do with your physical health, your environment, your upbringing, your relationships. There's so many things that may affect the mindset. So the bottom line here is, don't be afraid to spend time working on your mindset so that you can move to all these other areas, right? There is accountability comes secondly, right? So when your mindset is actually feeling ready, then you sort of start to figure out, okay, how can I put in my time on this? How can I organize my time? How can I structure my time? How can I be productive? What should I even be doing? But you see how they're interlinked. If you're not putting in the time, there may be like, where you can start to listen to yourself and say, am I subconsciously procrastinating because of XYZ, insert reason here. And so accountability comes second. Accountability means putting in that time, right? It's predicated on feeling like your mindset is ready to embark on whatever journey it may be. The third and the tip top is the practical strategy. So I say here, careful. If you're good with mindset and accountability, don't screw up the practical strategy. And what I mean by that is, if your mindset's feeling ready and you're putting in the time, the last thing we want is for you to put in time on a strategy that doesn't make sense. For example, if you're job searching and you don't really know the best practices to job search, and you're just applying online all day for months and you're not really getting anywhere with your traction, we might need to come back to the drawing board and understand, what are the best practices? How should I pivot my job search strategy and understand the tactics that I can really use versus doing the same thing that might not be an informed approach and expecting different outcomes. So once you have your mindset ready, once you start to put in the time, then you really want to make sure you have the guidance and support and resources to go about that process in the best way possible. So each of these three are super, super, super important. The accountability, right? If we're not putting in the time, that's a critical core middle component. And then once we are putting in that time, we need to make sure we're doing it in the best possible way, right? Hopefully this makes sense. This is this fundamental three keys, and it's a good way of assessing, where do I need a little support right now, right? Like, which of these three buckets could I use a little love and a little TLC, right? So I'm going to quickly go into some of the common limiting beliefs, and this has to do with the mindset from a career perspective. So oftentimes we do feel a sense of stress around our careers, and that's normal. It means that you care about your career and your progress, but we want to transition that feeling from caring and exhibiting it in a stressful manner to see, how can we structure a process? How can we apply some actionable next steps that will help us achieve our goal? So if you're feeling stressed, you just want to be very careful that sometimes your immediate reaction is to go to the job boards and apply to the next best thing. So take a moment to zoom out, take a step back and say, what's my goal right now? And what might be the best next steps forward? It might be finding a little support. It might be finding a little clarity on your next direction if you're just applying blindly. So there's any number of next steps, but when you take a step back, it allows you to think about your process and your next steps rather than just operating immediately out of that feeling of stress, right? Security. We often, think about, okay, what's a job that's going to be financially secure? And that's important. But we can't ignore the fact of what role, what industry, what environment is going to be suitable for you. What are you going to be interested in, and what work is going to align with you and your strengths and your interests? So remember that all of these factors are important. And I just say this because, when sometimes we make decisions purely for security, we if you ignore all those other elements, we just simply can't forget, we are holistic human beings here. You're going to show up at work, and if you hate the work, or if you're not good at it, or if you're not aligned with it, that's not going to be the most secure path to be on, right? So we can't ignore all of these factors. Sometimes we tell ourselves, I can't do this. I either don't know how, or I'm not capable. Make sure you learn before you tell yourself whether you can or can't pursue a certain path. Sometimes we jump to those assumptions. So just make sure you have full information and you're making decisions out of an informed place rather than decisions from just a feeling or a limiting belief, right? Confidence, there's a lot we could talk about with imposter syndrome and how do I feel whether my objective skill set is aligned with this job or not. There's a lot we could talk about there, but just make sure you're guardrailing yourself to learn first before you decide whether the path is a fit or not. And oftentimes we look at, I have never done this before, or my past roles are only in this type of experience. Your story is going to go such a long way. If you have done your due diligence around which role and which industry is the right fit, and you've done your homework and you really understand that path forward and you understand why it's a fit for you, you're probably going to be one of the best candidates in the interview, right? Most candidates go in an interview and just sort of say what they think the person wants to hear. So if your story is based on this research and you based on an understanding of what that path is and why you're such a strong fit, that is going to go a very, very, very long way. So don't be afraid that, sometimes oftentimes pivoting is very feasible and possible and sometimes the best thing. So don't feel like you have to only do what you've done before. We often think about the long term. I like to over-index on the short term, and I still like to consider where might this role lead me in the future. But I don't like to recommend just saying like, where do I want to be in like multiple decades from now, and then reverse engineer it. The reason is you may very well change, the world's going to change, that role is going to change. And so I like to say 60-70% of your decision around your next step should be what is the next step that's an amazing fit, because that may open the doors and open the possibilities to all what's to come in a way that you may not even have known what exists yet, right? So once you get one step closer, it may very well open up that world for you. A lot of times people say, I'm open to any role, I'm open to any industry. To me, that is a signal that you're not sure what the best fit is for you. And if you're open to so many things, not only is it overwhelming and confusing, it can slow you down, actually. There's this counterintuitive theory that if you are more open, there's more opportunities. But we want you to actually just find more of the right thing. So really dive deeply into what role, what industry, and what environment is the best fit, and how do I get more of that? Sometimes we are only going after what we're aware of, right? So be open to saying, I'm not sure. I'm learning more about this role, this team, this department, this company, this industry. I'm learning more about what's out there. There's actually over 160,000 unique roles just in the US alone. Doesn't mean you have to understand every single one, but it means that it's okay when you're talking with others, and especially when you're talking with others, to let them meet you where you're at and where your current level of self-awareness is. And that way they can help inform you. They may introduce you to someone. If you say, oh, I'm looking into A, B, and C, how can they help you look into those things? We often think of interviewing as this just like thing we have to do well. I like to think about it as a conversation. Who do you want to talk to about what, why, where, when, how, right? So that conversation, whether it's networking or interviewing, is a mirror into the work. So don't get like a check the box, I have to do this interview really well. It's more about, who do I even want to be talking to? These conversations are about the problems you're then going to go be paid to solve, right? So bring it back to the root and the basics of kind of what you're really doing when you're applying and when you're interviewing. We often think about applying. Don't forget to explore. If you're still learning about different roles and what they entail, if you're still learning about different industries, know that it's okay to spend time, and it's encouraged to spend time to figure out what it is you want and what a good fit is before you start applying. So applying is not the only job search activity you can do. And we often look at others around us. I always want you to bring it back to you. If others around you are a positive source of inspiration or support or guidance or motivation or anything like that, great. But if you notice that you're comparing yourself to others, remember, I always say, keep your eyes on your own paper, and remember that you are the one living and breathing this job every day. And so that's who matters, as well as your family and your loved ones. Those are the people that matter, but they want the best for you as well. They want you to be happy and fulfilled in your path as well. And that's how you're going to show up the best for them. We often feel fear when it comes to careers. I like to say, replace fear with learning. If you have an open question or a hesitation, if you have a hesitation, turn it into a question, turn that question into answers and information, and use that information to make really good decisions. Right? So that's going to help you figure out your next steps. Fear may also come from just simply requiring reflection, self-reflection, or learning. One of those two things can usually, hopefully, not replace the fear, but come after it, right? So the fear is okay to feel, and then how do you sort of, in a healthy way, channel that into a next step or an action that's going to help you move forward. Okay, let's move from mindset to accountability, okay? Step one is setting goals. You want to be realistic. In a given day or in a given week, what goal can you do, right? What makes sense, depending on where you're at, whether you're doing skill development, whether you're doing career exploration, whether you're doing job search. Of course, this depends on what phase you're in, but what goal is realistic, okay? Co-working is an amazing focus mate, but you can also, focusmate.com is a great resource, but you can also just find any sort of peer community. Co-working, it's this like new psychological thing where if you're working with someone else, even silently co-working, it just goes such a long way to keep you productive in that moment. Time boxing. This is another one of my favorite tactics, right? So if you think about it, time is that precious resource. I personally love to time box on a digital calendar, but you can also do it on a handwritten calendar. So time boxing simply means, okay, imagine you want to be productive from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., whatever it may be. You're literally dividing up the pieces of that day into boxes or categories. Now, that still involves being realistic. If you're going to take a break for lunch, do you want 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes? If you want to take a break for meditation or exercise or anything like that, all of these realistic parts of your day, even if it's not work related, still can go into these time boxes because this is your decision of where to spend your time. It's one of the best ways to be visual and concrete around what's your plan. And that doesn't mean every second has to be busy. There could be white space or unscheduled time, and that's important too. But time boxing is such an amazing way to say, I know I'm being intentional with my plan for this day, and here's how I'm going to visualize it. Right? So it's an exercise. It really forces you to figure out the puzzle of your day. And it's especially important for things like networking, right? It's so easy to just apply online to jobs, but networking is one example of an activity where you really have to proactively protect that time in order to make sure that you're actually going to go spend that time and figure out, oh, what does networking even mean? It means finding the right people, reaching out to them, and scheduling some informational calls. So be proactive, protect the time that relates to the activities you want or need to be doing. And then that time plan becomes an amazing way to feel intentional and on track. Your internal self-motivation, right? There's truly nothing that can replace that. Why are you even motivated to pursue your own career goals? Write a post-it, keep it somewhere handy. What is motivating you to even work on this goal? And this relates to the next bullet, which is your career interests, right? There's a reason I've been able to build my business now for almost 5 years. And that's because you can hear how loud and fast I'm talking. I feel so that this is such an important topic to be intentional with your career because it's so impactful. That's something that I personally believe. So the question for you is, what are those personal beliefs that you can then go work in a job where you can actually exhibit that care that you have? Every job is solving a problem for someone. It's helping create impact and contribution for some sort of problem or some sort of end user or audience. So what problems do you really truly care about? And how is that going to drive your motivation in your career accountability to your career goals? You see? And then, of course, just getting other human beings involved. So we talked about co-working, getting a peer, mentor, coach. Get someone involved in your process. It could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could be a spouse, it could be a family member. Anyone you can be accountable to see how you're doing. Help you stay on top of it. Give them updates. Sometimes even the act of sending an email or saying it out loud does such wonders for allow us to not only stay on track, but think about how we're doing. And the ability to just, figure out how we're doing. Sometimes we have to talk out loud just to realize it. So getting other people involved is such an amazing way to stay on top of it, stay motivated, and really figure out how you're doing. So we talked about those three areas, right? We talked about the mindset. We talked about the accountability. Practical strategy. This depends on what your goal is at the moment. And there's a lot of different best practices. I think in careers, people often think about like, I have to job search on my own and I just have to figure it out and I have to apply online. There's a lot of tactics and tips and frameworks that relate to the best practices of what you can do to achieve these career goals well and properly and efficiently and effectively. So try to learn first and foremost. I'm going to give you some quick tips, but the bottom line is whether you're using online resources or a mentor or a coach or peers, try to gather the guidance, the strategy. So you're not just feeling like, I have to figure it out. I have to figure it all out on my own. You don't have to, right? So the number one tip here is gaining clarity on your path before you pursue job search. We at Woken, I'll give you guys my information, but we are big proponents and have a very unique framework to do career exploration. Career exploration in a nutshell is learning and reflection to figure out your best fit direction. Now, if you're deciding on upskilling, if that's your goal, you want to clarify your path, do research, networking, and reflection, and figure out if there's a course or certification or any format of education that would be the best way for you to proceed with how you want to gain the skills that you want to gain, right? So that's kind of the best practice framework for deciding on upskilling opportunities. If you're improving personal branding, yes, of course, you can get templates, but you can also get help ideally to edit and strengthen your materials. When you're dealing with a resume or anything like that, it's kind of hard to like fully do it by yourself in a best practice way. So get another pair of eyes to help you edit and get that fresh eyes and perspective to see how is my materials coming across? How is my LinkedIn profile coming across? How is this cover letter coming across? Can I either use a template or someone to help me edit? For job searching, you want to really learn how to network because it is the proven way to land a job. And you also really want to properly divide your time so that you're not just applying online solely and hoping that that's going to get you somewhere. Now, for career advancement, you really want to manage up. You really want to make sure you're having explicit conversations if you are currently working with your manager, and also continuing to do network and continuing to do skill development. You know, there's a bunch of things you can do on a monthly basis, whether it's research, networking, skill development. But the bottom line with career advancement is figuring out where you want to go and making sure that you're not only working on it explicitly yourself, but you're conversing with others to help move you forward, right? Learning about what's out there, gaining those skills, and making sure someone, whether it's your manager or mentors, are helping you progress upwards, right? Whatever that may mean for you. Getting support from others, right? So this is just super brief career exploration. We touched on it a bit. A process that is distinct from and a precursor to the job search. So the bottom line is you can learn and reflect to figure out what path you feel confident in pursuing as your next step. That's really what we want. We want you to feel certain that you know what's next for you before you start applying. And this little flow chart here is a very quick way of outlining what that process looks like. For the sake of time, I will push forward. If you want me to come back, I'm happy to dive deeper into what career exploration is all about. And yeah, this is just super quickly who we are. I know we're going to jump into Q&A, but Woken is here for you, as is Power to Fly, to make sure that we're guiding you through all of these different processes and steps. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I know I just went super quick. And I do see a question in the chat, but Hunter, you tell me where you want to start.
Well, first off, I want to start by thanking you for that presentation because that was absolutely fantastic. There's so much stuff in there that's helpful and for us to springboard off of and talk about. But yeah, there's already a question in the chat here. So let's jump in with that. And so, listeners, I have a list of questions that were pre-submitted by some of y'all who wrote questions in advance, and I'm going to be going down those. And if you have any questions, like someone has already dropped in the chat, feel free. That's what the next 35 minutes are for. So we had a question in the chat that said, so we talked about, and you mentioned mentorships and connections and getting feedback and building those networks. And someone asked, what are your thoughts, ideas around getting a mentor, asking outright to be a mentor versus periodic reach outs with questions without any formal commitments?
Great question. I kind of like the idea of both. Like, if you have a coach, you may or may not need like a mentor in addition, but it really depends on what it's serving for you. You might get a mentor who's like technical in your role, in your field, in your industry, and you might have someone separately for just like career development. It really, you have to ask yourself, like, what do I want from this person? But whether it's a coach or a mentor, it definitely does not hurt to have something periodic. Even if it's once a quarter, which is really not that frequent, I would say that's like a bare minimum, like really good cadence. And for the right mentor who's really interested in mentoring, I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to get an hour, once a quarter. And it could be a more meaningful update. And then the beauty of that periodic relationship is you try to really come away with some specific takeaways and next steps to report back on in the next quarter. So it does create that specific, to-dos, takeaways. It creates that accountability for you to report back on it. It also creates a stronger relationship so that they may introduce you to their network. Or what if you want a job in the future? Like, they get to know you as well, and they get to really be able to speak for you. They may think of you when they see other opportunities arise wherever in their travels. So there definitely is a benefit to building, I would say, at least one mentor relationship consistently, even if it is just once a quarter. In terms of the periodic outreach, personally, I love to have a few different people in my corner for that. So that way, if you have a very specific question on something, is there someone in your network who's a friendly, nice, experienced person who might be willing to answer an email? But you want to think about, like, what are my questions? Where do I need help? And if I had a question on something, could I send a quick email to whom? And building relationships so that you have sort of the array of your needs covered to an extent. So I think that email is good to have. It's good to have your network there that you can email if and when you need it. Or if it's, an off the cuff impromptu, it could be an email, or it could be like, do you have 20 minutes? I realized I have this challenge and I'd love your support. As long as your ask is specific and thoughtful with what you really need from that person, it can be an impromptu email or call. But I think having something regular really never hurts you if you're open to it. But this stuff does take a little trial and error, right? You might meet with somebody for 1 or 2 or 3 quarters, and you might realize it's really helpful and it's a great fit, or it may not be. But attempting that journey, getting somebody who's more experienced than you to meet with regularly, really never hurts. If they're open to it, if they're willing, just try to really use their time wisely, be thoughtful, be prepared, have a bit of an agenda. What are your topics that you'd like to use in that meeting? So just try to make it easy for them to help you, and organized and thoughtful when you even propose the idea at all. So they know how much time and effort is really involved. Maybe it's an hour a quarter, and maybe it's a few emails if and when you need it throughout. Usually, I would say a lot of professionals are going to be open to that. I hope that answers your question.
Those are great answers, great suggestions. And I love too, when you were talking about just trying it on, if it's a new experience, and the information that we get from, it's not quite a right fit, helps us inform what is a right fit, right? We don't really know until we know. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, it is very true. But you can be thoughtful too. Like, it's almost as if writing a job posting, like, what would be the 3 to 5 bullets of what you look for in a mentor? Like, look, some of these mentor relationships, I would say, are like kind of a low requirement. Like, as long as they're kind of ahead of you in your journey, where working in a role or a team or a field that you're really interested in, usually you can get what you need. Of course, you want to see if you personally vibe and get along, and that they're giving you specific tips and takeaways and things to go do and action and learn and resources, and that they're being fruitful that way. But usually, like, it's more about you, I think, researching who is the right person. Do they have the background that I'm going to benefit from? And yeah, you totally can try it on and see how it goes. And, again, so much I think of like life in general is just try it, instead of waiting around or hesitating. Like, get a mentor. It's not going to hurt anything. What's the worst case, this scenario, right? Maybe it's not the most perfect thing in the world. So guess what? No one really committed to anything. And you don't have to make it like, oh, minimum of this month or anything. It doesn't have to be so, crazy commitment. It could just be like, let's try it out. And it never hurts. So I think starting it, ripping the Band-Aid off, trying it, getting started with that, it, like you said, it allows you to build on it, even if you get another mentor in the future that's even better. So I would say better to have than not have.
Absolutely. And so what we're talking about too is mentors can give us guidance, and they can be part of the network of accountability. And we had a question submitted in advance that said, what kind of thoughts can cause us to not be accountable?
Yeah. I think a bunch of kind of the limiting beliefs that we sort of went through today are some common ones.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it could be anything. And that's where, if you remember from that triangle, I was saying how it's like your physical health, that's not a thought, that's a feeling. Your relationships, your upbringing, your physical environment around you. Like there's so many things that can affect your mindset and in turn your accountability. So I think the key is to like take a pulse check of yourself and build that self-awareness. And at the very least, build the muscle of, am I going to meditate or journal on a daily basis to at least tap in and understand how I'm feeling and how I'm doing, right? If you're really working on eliciting the understanding of how you're doing, that's like the baseline. And then there's any number of things that could get in your way. And we could talk about the common ones and we could totally debunk those. But the key is first getting to know what is getting in your own way. So getting to know yourself is that number one thing that you really need. And then you can go the next step to say, how do I work on that thing? How do I improve that thing? How do I overcome it? Or, do I need a coach or therapist, a peer, a mentor, whoever it may be? Sometimes it's just, I need to have a conversation with a loved one because I feel, pressure, or I feel this unspoken, it could be an unspoken feeling that, comes from family. It could be any number of things. So tap into understanding what that may be. And then you could figure out how to work through it, how to work around it, how to get over and above it. And that's really why that mindset is the foundation.
It truly is. I was thinking about if you want to, if you were to jump into that foundation of Rachel's pyramid, you might find this other pyramid called the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? Rachel knows exactly what I'm talking about. And it is a pyramid, if you're kind of struggling, maybe where what needs, all those things that Rachel just rattled off, they're all in here in this little structure. It's like your psychological, your safety, your belonging and love, your esteem, the aesthetic, all this stuff needs to be in line. And it's in this system, it's believed that the order is you need this to have this and then have this. And for all of these things, it's you need to have those things so that you can then do the work that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't see it like a checklist or requirements or anything like that. It's more like you're going to know if you allow your space to tap into how you're doing and feeling and thinking, you'll that time and space is going to allow you to uncover, whether consciously or subconsciously, something has been serving you or holding you back. And so, if your environment, if you've been feeling healthy or feeling positive physically, you don't need to go oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. If you've been doing it, great. You're probably not even thinking about it or worrying about it because it's just going fine and going well. What we need to just simply uncover is within that pyramid, is there anything that is, preventing you from getting to the next stage? And so I just show that because sometimes that accountability, people are like, why am I stalling? Why am I not putting in the time or this, that, and the other thing? And it's all right, let's figure out deeper if there's something that we're not even explicitly aware of that's getting in your way. I think people jump into I'm not putting in the time, but it's why? Right. And sometimes it could be something that you was totally unrelated. It could be a very deep rooted fear of I mentioned your upbringing, like sometimes your family influences affect how you go about careers. And you might be like, you know what, I really want a new job. Why haven't I been applying? Oh, you know what, maybe deep down it's like, well, you know what, my mom really wants this for me and my partner really wants this for me, but I don't think I want either of those things. And so all of a sudden I'm stuck and I'm not doing anything. That's just kind of a random example. But the point is, it's like, you know, accountability, it's not the foundation. If you're not putting in the time, try to understand that subconscious something or other, if there's anything that's affecting you, right? Yes, I can show you that pyramid one more time. I'm just looking at the chat. Give me a second. I'll pull it up on my screen. Cool.
Great. So yeah, Rachel will put her pyramid. I'll also spell out the other one that I'm referring to. You can just find it on Wikipedia quite easily. And between those, you got your full accountability and your well-being and your mindset. You know, I love too when you're talking about, you know, your family, and you mentioned if it's therapy or meditation or, you know, a combination of any of these things. Life wheel. Thank you. Yes, that is a really good one too. You want to tell us a little bit about the life wheel?
Yes. Sorry, I was just thinking of it. So it's funny because like we're kind of getting into like, you could use this pyramid as a way of assessing like how you're doing or where you're at or where you feel that you need support. The life wheel is another one, right? You could look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You could look at this pyramid. You could also look, the life wheel is, if you Google it, there's a lot of different versions of it. You could almost create your own. The concept is, imagine you just have this like circle and you split it up into like little slices of the pie, however many slices you want. And each category is the things that are really important to you. So maybe it's like your relationships, your physical health, your social time and fun time, professional and work fulfillment, financials, whatever else, learning. It could literally be any categories that are meaningful to you. Getting nature, like literally you can make your own, but you can Google it and get some ideas from just Googling it as well. And then what happens is you sort of like fill it in. You could almost color it in to say, you know what, in each of these slices, I feel like I'm a 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. So it's a way of just assessing, how am I doing holistically? And is there an area that I kind of need to focus on a little bit more? But that just kind of shows you more of like the categories of what's important to you in life. And so the reason why something may not be, you know, a 10 out of 10, that's like a bit of a different thing. But it is a tool just to elicit like, where do I want to even focus my energy right now in life? Like, where do I need to start first? Like, you know, we're all balancing it all, to be honest, right? We're all trying to be a little healthy. We're dealing with, you know, we want to be fulfilled at work. We want to have good social relationships. So if you're sort of figuring out, where do I want to work on right now? What's that area? That's another tool that, you know, was coming to my mind, similar to kind of what we're alluding to with these pyramids.
Absolutely. I love it. Okay, so keep those questions coming, folks. I'm going to keep going down our pre-submitted ones. We touched a little bit on this already, Rachel, but how can we stop justifying our lack of accountability?
Interesting. Yeah, I think if you're justifying it, like any lack of accountability is okay. So the key difference is understanding it versus like justifying it in a way that you make excuses. Like, it's very possible you just reasonably have a really busy, stressful week at work or whatever it may be. There's very possibly reasonable reasons why you may not be putting in the time. But if you know that deep down it's an excuse, that's where we need to just have that hard talk with ourselves and just say, like, how much longer do I want to spend making excuses? And do I want to try to go about this a little differently? Do I want to understand the real reason that I'm not putting in the time? So that's kind of a choice of when you're ready to kind of face yourself in a way and face what's really happening. And just, again, this is why I talk about the mindset, because it's okay to spend time. If you want to work with a therapist or a coach or mentor or a peer, just to like, you could spend a month or two or however long. And by the way, mindset work happens all the time. But if you need like a focused moment to just dig deep, figure it out, unravel it, instead of justifying the lack of accountability, I would just try to say, you know what, would it be more productive to spend time actually just facing and navigating and understanding how I'm feeling and why I'm not being accountable? So like, I guess the whole point is here that I think people just, again, they jump to this accountability of like applying to jobs or whatever it may be. There is just as much productive time spent or more productive if you're literally just like writing out and thinking about how you're feeling, how you're doing, what's holding you back, whether you're writing it, talking about it with somebody, or whatever it may be, meditating, healing, just processing. You might need grieving. You might need to accept or process the fact that you left a role. Whatever mindset work has to happen, it's still productive work. So I would just, this is why I show those three areas of the pyramid, right? So instead of justifying why you're not spending the time, I would say if and when you feel ready to face the facts, you want to ask yourself, how much longer would you be okay not being productive on your career goals? And what level of support is going to help you? It's, again, remember, it's like an order. It's not that you're going backwards. It's that you cannot skip over the mindset if it really requires you to be in that bucket. So that's, I would just reframe it as like, I'm going to spend productive time in a different way. And then when you spend time on the mindset, eventually, ideally, that gets you to a place of truly being able to be ready to then be accountable in the way that you originally were referring to, probably is what I'm alluding to in this question. Does this make any sense, what I'm saying?
I absolutely. And I think what stands out too is, like you're saying, it's not an order, it's the foundation, right? Like you need this structure underneath to support you in what you want to do.
Yep, exactly.
This awareness. Someone mentioned Day One is a good journaling app. Yes, I've used that. And journaling, that's a great way to like process stuff. There's a bunch of different books that offer journaling exercises. And one that I'm familiar with is The Artist's Way. It could be for artists, but it could be for business, whatever you want to do. And one of her foundations, she also has like a 12 steps of a program for creating new work and making pivots in your life. And she suggests doing 10 minutes every morning of just like brain dump onto the page. Like, don't even think, just write, kind of like when we were in grade school, like free writing or whatever, like doing that again. And I did it for many months and it's like, oh, interesting. There's some things that are coming back up repeatedly. This is on my mind. I'm upset about this, or I want to change this, or I'm excited about this, or whatever it is. It's these ways we can check in and, like you said, do the work on ourselves so that we can move forward.
I love that. I've totally recommended that. If you're, it's an amazingly powerful way to just like, our brain is swimming with all these like distracting thoughts going on. It's like getting organized. And that could start with a messy brain dump, but just getting it out of your head on paper, so powerful to go the rest of your day and just be able to either work on some of those things, or at the very least, focus on what you need to focus on and know that all those other things will be tackled at one point. They're on paper instead of in the back of your head. I've done transcendental meditation. That's another, tool or tip or tactic you're all very welcome to try. You can YouTube some good tutorials on it, but transcendental used to actually do the same exact thing for me, which is like, let me just get 20 minutes to actually just allow those thoughts to come so that the rest of the day I can actually just focus on what I'm doing. We all have so many thoughts that are like circling all the time. So whether it's the brain dump, journaling, meditation, whatever it may be, it's a good way of clearing out. And like all of these thoughts, instead of treating them like distractions, they might be like legitimate to-dos, things you should look into. Like if they're on your mind, they're probably on your mind for a reason. So whether you write about it or whatever it may be, think about it, get it out on paper, get it out somewhere. It allows you to then be productive with it, versus sometimes I think we have this like weird stigma about like our distractions, our thoughts. We have so much going on. It's stress, all these negative connotations. Well, they might be just things that you really need to do, or you should do, or you want to do. And those are great, right? So get them out there on paper, and maybe you don't even have to look at that paper until the weekend if you don't want to, but just even getting it out of your brain, like, can be even just cathartic in the moment. And then it actually can be quite productive as well.
Absolutely. And in my experience, it's led me to be like, oh, this reoccurring thought is actually pointing me towards this other thing, because there's all these different synapses that are connected in our brains that once we start exploring them, you're like, oh, this is related to that. Oh, I get it now. But it took a week of writing about it or whatever, or meditating.
Yeah, even if we wanted to go a step further, mind maps is another interesting one.
Yes.
You can Google that as well. Yes, you're welcome. I am seeing a question in the chat, but Hunter, let me know where you want to go next.
Yeah, totally. No, I love, it's about pivoting. So let's pivot to another topic. So I know networking is really important, especially when pivoting. Any tips on it if you're trying to get into remote work specifically?
Well, so Alina, there's a lot that we could talk about with networking, and actually, Hunter, maybe you can help me. I'm sure we have good links. With Power to Fly, I've done a lot of chats in the past that like go very deep into networking. So maybe we can find some of those links for you. But getting into remote work, I'm not going to say it's exactly the same as like in-person work, but I think a lot of the principles are very much the same with networking. In terms of, who are all the different types of people you can reach, right? Where are you going to find them? How do you research and identify those warm connections, introductions, alumni networks, any way that you can find the right people? How are you going to reach out to them and be really clear and authentic with what you're asking them for? Hopefully, maybe an informational chat, maybe you're looking to learn from them. And then, of course, there's a lot we could talk about in terms of what to do on those calls. But in essence, if you're job searching, networking is essentially meeting the right people, getting those informational calls, and on the call, you want to see if there's openings that might be relevant for you and your background, and see if they can introduce you to a hiring manager, an HR person, or someone else in their network, right? If you're just purely looking into remote work, that just is predicated a bit on the research around like which companies are fully operating remotely, and just making sure, again, back to who do you want to talk to, who's the right person to talk to. So that's like a really, really, really quick, synopsis on networking, but we could have entire sessions all about that. So I don't want to go too deep, but we'll make sure we get those resources for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll pull some more. You're already probably familiar with that link that I dropped in because you're here at the Chat and Learn, but there is a great opportunity to look at all of our upcoming events because that is networking. I mean, you're doing it right now, so good on you. You are here, you're asking questions, you're participating, and there's plenty more resources there at Woken as well, and you can go on their events. So that way, yes, you're absolutely happy to do it. We also do, I'll do a plug for Power to Fly before each summit. Each week, there is a networking session on an app called Gather Round, and that's where we pair people up. And if you're on it, you get to do like icebreaker questions and mix and mingle, and it's like a digital networking session with cameras on where you get to participate. So that's something that Power to Fly also offers every month. The week of the summits, they're usually either every day or every other day of the summit. It kind of fluctuates depending on the summit that month. That's one, and we'll pull up some more on the back end. Maybe Erica can help me pull up some links in the back, but I'll find some too. Okay, friends, so we have a little time check here, about 11 minutes left. So if you have any questions, feel free to keep them coming in the chat. There was a great question here. I'm going to pivot. So we talked about, you mentioned ways, Rachel, of managing our time. You talked a bit about that as well. Excuse me. And I love this question. Is multitasking related to productivity, or does it affect productivity? I love this question.
Great question. I should really add this to my slides, actually. It is my belief, and you can find research as well, multitasking is a myth, right? Like, we actually can't really do two things at the same time. So you might be toggling between 2 or 3 or 4 different projects, or maybe your email and then your Slack and then your whatever. Like, you might be toggling between multiple things very quickly, but we actually can't really do 2 things at once. Like, you might be like moving your arms one way and moving your legs another way at the same time, but like to physically at a computer be typing to 2 different people at once, we can't do 2 things at once. We actually can't. So again, time boxing comes back to this same idea, which is when you plan your day, You could plan it in whatever increments, but 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45, an hour, whatever it may be. But time blocking to say, you know what, I'm going to focus on this activity right now. And it allows you to prioritize it. Time blocking also allows you to ask yourself, when do I have the most energy? Like, should I do networking in the mornings or in the evenings or whatever it may be? Or should I do it at the beginning of the week or the end of the week? So there's a puzzle around not just the time management, the energy management. But yeah, multitasking, in my experience and belief, doesn't exist. So I would, again, this comes back to time blocking, where how can you plan this? You know, this is the concept of like, there's only so many hours in a day. And when you do the time blocking, you're basically saying, okay, like with my 5 hours or 7 hours or whatever it may be, these are the things I'm going to focus on. Now, that may very well change, and that's fine. If it changes around and you change those little blocks or you reorder them or whatever it may be, totally fine. But there's still only one thing at a time that can get done. So it actually helps a lot in the workplace, where you can better give someone else expectations on, I can get back to you on this probably by Thursday, if not Friday, or whatever it may be, because you can see your week and you can roughly estimate, you know what, I think this project is going to take 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. And given everything else I have to do, and given how much time I have in a day, it becomes like a math problem. How and when can I get this done? And when can I get it finished? And when can I actually give those expectations back to the next person? So yeah, multitasking doesn't exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, that we only have so much, at least in my experience, I only have so much bandwidth. You know, I can even just, you know, if I'm trying to text and have a conversation, I'm only getting some of what you're saying, if any of it.
Yep, 100%. Exactly. That's a great example. That's like a real life example. And it's one of those unfortunate realities of just like having cell phones. But yes, I'm sure you've all in our audience seen that happen, whether you've done it or seen someone else do it. And like, it's never ideal. Like, you can't really have a purposeful, strong, great conversation if you're doing two things at once. It's really hard. You might be able to like listen and hear. I think it's a skill we maybe start adapting in our lives today. But when I think about multitasking, I'm more so thinking about, you know, you sitting at your computer, probably doing some job, career oriented thing, whether it's for a current job, whether it's upskilling, job searching, whatever it may be. And if we're talking purely about career goals, there's no reason to even think about like, so I'll say a different way. Multitasking to me is more like, for example, during a job search, you might have different activities in a week that you want to do. You might want to do networking, job applications, a little skill development, a little research, a little reflection, whatever it may be. There's a lot of key activities to go into job search, but that just, again, comes down to time blocking, and it comes down to planning. Okay, I'm going to reflect at the end of the week, or maybe skill development I'm only going to do on the weekends. And maybe networking, I'm going to make sure to do on Mondays. So even if you're like multitasking in the sense of you have a lot of different things that you want to do in a given week, that still comes down to like, in a given day or hour, what am I going to focus on right now? So if whoever asked this, I would challenge you to really think about, if anyone out there is even using that word or concept, like I would really just come back to the drawing board, because it's very possible that even thinking about that concept might be what's getting in your way, you know, as the possibility of staying focused.
Wise words, wise words. And to circle back, Erica, our superstar behind the scenes, who's posting as the Power to Fly Chat and Learn, she has just posted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different chats on networking, including the first one off there is with Rachel. So feel free to check that out. I pulled up 1, 2 there. The last one, I'm sorry, it doesn't have, it'll just take you straight to the YouTube page there. That one is specifically for networking for introverts was the topic. And we've been touching on that a little bit as well. And we've been chatting a lot about that this month here at Power to Fly. So we have just 6 minutes left. So if there's any burning questions, now is the time, my friend. I can probably get one more in from y'all. And before we wrap up here, there's a lot more great pre-submitted questions as well, Rachel. And, we've talked on touched on so many great topics. You know, I don't, in 5 minutes, it's like, where do we want to go? You know, you'd mentioned a bit about, imposter syndrome, and there was a question of several questions about that, about not feeling good enough, and that getting in our way. And I love in your talk, you mentioned how, you know, check to see if you can actually not do the thing before you think you cannot do the thing, right? Like, get more information. Can you you'd like to elaborate on the helpful tips for imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I remember in the pre-submitted, some people think about age and like, is it too late for me to pivot?
Yes.
I like to, again, with imposter syndrome, with fear, with any insecurities or anything like that, we want to try to get as objective as humanly possible with like, what is my skill set? What is like my propensity, my affinities, my tendencies? What would I be great at? Given your self-awareness of your strengths and the style of work that really suits you. So there's your potential, there's your current skill set. And within your current skill set, understanding transferable skills sometimes is a hard concept because we see it so narrowly with like, here's how I did it in this job. But how could that be similar or relevant to other jobs, right? How might you just transition the language of how you used to talk about it? How is it relevant to potential, where you want to go in the future? So there's current skill set, transferable skills, there's your potential, and just getting to know what's suitable and natural for you. You might look at a job posting and try to give yourself some rankings around like, how skilled am I at this thing right now? Would I be great at that if I were to get trained up? Would I even want to get trained up on that skill? The other thing is networking. That, by way of having informational calls, you can really learn the reality and the nuances as to how do people pivot into this thing? What do you really look for? Can you tell me about the last 3 new hires who you hired onto this team? And like, did they have any common trends or common things that stood out to you? Maybe there's an upskilling course or certification that really goes a long way in that industry. And maybe it's really reputable and people trust that if you have that, you have the right training. Or maybe it's a project that you could do on the side of your job pro bono. Like if you were to do whatever project, and build up a little portfolio that proves your ability. So how do people pivot in? How do people beef up their skills and their background to be relevant enough for that pivot to make it happen? So come back to the reality of things, try to get examples, information, facts, stories, and you want to get that objective information about how this has happened, and you want to get objective information about yourself, who you are, and what you're great at or would be great at. So it's kind of trying to get objective on both sides. The key with imposter is we just, we have a lens where we unfortunately sometimes see ourselves as less than we actually are. So with whatever tools and tactics and, whether you're working with a coach or whatever it may be, you want to try to really recognize your actual skill set and your actual potential. Not easy, takes a little work. That falls into that mindset bucket of what we talked about, but take the time to actually work on that goal, which is, how do I see my skill set objectively and fairly the way another person might? That, that's a worthy goal to spend some time on. I'm sure we could go into a whole session on imposter, but I'll pause there.
Well, with just 1 minute left, I would like to thank you, Rachel, for this powerhouse conversation we've been having today. And I just want to highlight in the chat, Rachel will be back next week on Tuesday, exactly a week from today at 1 p.m. with how to use visualization to boost your career outcomes. And also next week on that same day, I'll be moderating a chat on tips to grow your network as an introvert. So there'll be some great tips there as well with another awesome panelist. So Rachel, how can folks stay connected to you? LinkedIn, your website, what's the best ways?
Yes, I will share my website. It's iamwoken.com. Feel free to connect with me, Rachel Serwetz, on LinkedIn. And we always offer a free initial call if you'd like to chat about, how you're doing and where you need some help. So reach out, stay in touch. We put a lot of free resources on our website as well. And we always come back with Power to Fly for more of these too. And follow us, stay connected, and we always love to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your help today. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for coming back. And thank you for coming back next week. I'm stoked that we'll see you again.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.